But I think it was safe to say as soon as we talked to ops guys or CEOs or anyone who'd served at sea, they saw this as a problem and they knew what was missing. And this is only something our industry can do. No one else has the reach. No one else has the resources. It's either us or it's no one. And that was pretty quickly accepted by everybody involved.
Welcome, everyone, and you are listening to The Last Dinosaur, and I'm your host, Chris Aversano. Going to the beach is a big part of my vacation plans, and I have been doing this for years with my family, and before that, on summer sea terms at SUNY Maritime. And whenever I get a chance, I go. If you're like me, oftentimes it's disturbing to see trash on the beach, and I've often wondered, maybe I'll pick it up, but really, how do we track the trash and hopefully find a way to clean that up? If that's of interest to you, then I have today's perfect guest, and that's Graeme Somerville-Ryan, founder of Eyesea. You may see him on the, on LinkedIn. It's prominent. Eyesea is a nonprofit organization with a mission to map global pollution and maritime hazards. Without proper data on maritime pollution, what and where it is, effective solutions are hard to find. Graeme, thanks for coming to the podcast.
Chris, great to be here.
Yeah, I've really been looking forward to this, especially as we're in the middle of summer and we're going to talk about something that, at least for me, is very much, in the forefront when people head to the beach. So let's jump right in. How did you come up, with this idea for the app? I think it seems like intrinsic and like it's one of these things you go, this should have been around forever. But how did this come about? I'm very curious.
Yeah, we actually had that. Was one of the first pieces of feedback that was only vaguely insulting. Was like, this is so simple. An idiot could have thought of it. How come it doesn't exist already? It must exist already. Which I suppose was meant as a compliment. I guess the background. I've been in the maritime sector for about 13 years, working on PR and comms with a whole range of companies, and we'd been doing a bit of work on the removal of plastics from ships, single-use plastics and water bottles, which really only makes life harder for seafarers. MARPOL regulations, all the sort of compliance that the industry has to do. And it got me thinking about how could we do more than just compliance? What could we do, and what role could we play that was unique? Bit of Google research, and the more I sort of looked into the pollution, maritime pollution, the more it became painfully obvious. There's no data on this at all. The data that is claimed is either from minute amounts of information or based on models that are based on other models, which go back to the minute amount of data. And it occurred to me that the industry has ships and the industry has seafarers. And if we use ships and seafarers, we can actually fill in a large, blank spot on the map, so to speak. And that's sort of how it started. I guess the story goes is in early 2020, perfect timing, I flew to Hamburg as Lufthansa was cancelling flights to talk to the guys at ChartWorld about this, as there was sort of a bit of a sounding board, and was talking to Oliver Schwartz. And after 15 minutes, he sort of told me to stop talking. I know how to talk, and said, well, stop talking, Graeme. I'll build your app for you, or I'll pay for the build. And that's how Eyesea started. ChartWorld very kindly coughed up the funds to find a development team and begin the build of version 1. And then what we uncovered was a huge desire within the industry to do something about this problem. We had, I think, 800 ships offered to the project in about 8 weeks. And this was off 2 A4 pieces of paper, like, Graham's idea for Save the World. But I think it was safe to say as soon as we talked to ops guys or CEOs or anyone who'd served at sea, they saw this as a problem and they knew what was missing. And this is only something our industry can do. No one else has the reach. No one else has the resources. It's either us or it's no one. And that was pretty quickly accepted by everybody involved.
And that's really interesting because, like you said, you've identified a relatively simple problem, on the surface, and it came at it with a simple solution, tracking. Talk a little bit about one of the things I always like to ask people is kind of when you started, you had a vision, and when you sat down with the folks at ChartWorld and actually, had the two pieces of paper, Graham's vision and stuff, as you evolved here in the 3.5 years and during COVID and during those times, has the vision stayed mostly the same, or do you think has it expanded? Has it gone differently, than what you have? Because a lot of times, sometimes in the journey of building something out, or any journey, you think, okay, I'm gonna do this. I mean, I always thought, I would, stay forever in broking, and kind of it got to a point, and then I pivoted. And the last thing I would have thought 5 years ago is to be a podcast host and work at a fairly large, maritime data SaaS company. So, how is that pivoted for you as well within this product?
It's become far more complicated, we'll put it that way. I mean, when we started off, version 1 of the app was really a proof of concept. Would we collect data, and what would this data show? And my worst nightmare for version 1 was that we would collect 20,000 photos, because I knew I couldn't look at 20,000 photos. We collected 120,000 photos. We mapped a pretty significant bay in the global scheme of things. And we took 45,000 photos in 20 days. The biggest limiter on our data collection was the size of the memory on the phones that we were using. What we were, I guess, hoping at the beginning is that we would present this data on a platter to a whole range of people, and they would go, "Data, thank you, that's fantastic. Now we can finally take action." And what we realized is that we had this data, and they went, "I don't know what to do with it. What next?" And so it did change our focus a little bit from what was the next step in terms of what we could provide. And we recently had approval from the Eyesea board to build a data management platform, which would allow a port authority or a city authority or even a group of beach cleaners to manage the data that was coming in relating to pollution, to assess it, and then to allocate action. So and then to report on this as well. So basically fully automates the pollution data recording, reporting, and response. So it's become a lot more complicated than when we first started. A large part of this was also the non-shipping support that we received from the tech industry, which was completely overwhelming. We had Microsoft agreed to do a hackathon with us to do computer vision. So I wouldn't have to look at the photos. The machines could look at the photos and tell us what was in them. And this is no small offering when you consider some of our photos have possibly 100 to 150 items in them. So that changes our capacity enormously. We were given free machine learning and AI by a company called Dataiku. We were given free maps by Mapbox. We have been given some of the coolest technology, which allows plastic and oil to be seen off satellite photos to really some quite crazy levels of accuracy. And what we're now working on is, I guess, from the sort of the ChartWorld beginnings, is a system that overlays all these data layers and then lets people take sensible decisions based on need rather than fantasy or rumor. The options are endless, but when you suddenly have the ability to combine observational data with satellite imagery, potentially sonar as well, and then to provide this information to a city authorities looking to clean up waterways and coastal areas, the technology suddenly becomes really, really powerful. That's the sort of path we're now going down. And mate, I have no expertise in this at all. I was trained as an archaeologist, but I think what we've seen is that whatever's being done now isn't working, and we need new ideas, and we need perhaps a little bit of crazy in the mix to come up with solutions that actually deliver results. And a large part of what we're trying to do is to change the way pollution is managed. That if we have a resource to put into recovery, if we have $1 million to spend, for example, do we spend it trawling the Pacific Ocean at a cost of $7,000 a kilo of recovered material? Or do we fund a guy in India who's recovering pollution from his local beach for 10 cents a kilo? This requires data and information and supply chain coordination. And this is what we hope to be able to deliver moving forward.
Because you want to be able to supply some of the local stuff, but what gets more people's attention is, having a ship pull into San Francisco with, 15 kilos or 50 kilos or whatever of trash that could raise money, right? So it's almost whereas some guy actually is very effective on the beach someplace. That's nice, but we want the nice photo op. So I'm sure that that's a little bit of, you have to play that game. It sounds like that is one of the challenges. Let me ask you this though, right? You mentioned kind of governments and other things. And it sounds like you were embraced pretty quickly by the shipping companies, with companies going into the whole ESG and obviously the heavy E part. Are you just seeing more people embracing this because it kind of ticks the box, so to speak, for the E, or kind of how are you seeing shipping companies embrace you? Because my question also is, you guys, I believe, have location stamps. If you have a sailor on a ship that maybe the owner doesn't want, I mean, not for nefarious reason, but for commercial reasons, don't want people to know that the ship is in a certain port. How do you guys deal with that, I guess, and try to keep the shipping community engaged? Kind of like a little bit of privacy and a little bit of being doing the right thing.
Yeah, the app is anonymous. So you take a photo. We don't record who that photo comes from. We record that the photo has been uploaded, and we award 1 point to the seafarer and the ship, for example. And we started off very, very cautiously. Version 1 was a exercise in almost self-flagellation in terms of our collection of data, with having no idea where or when it came from. But what we found quite remarkably, I think, was that most shipping people who are involved in an Eyesea, that's become less of a worry. The fact that you don't report it doesn't mean this pollution doesn't exist. Everybody who's involved genuinely, this is probably, I guess, the standout thing for me, is everybody who's been involved in Eyesea genuinely cares about what we're trying to do. The companies that I would say are looking for a ESG sticker or the use of the Eyesea fish and that's it. There are other causes they could support. One of our sort of founding principles is that the shipping companies who are involved with Eyesea will collect data, and that hasn't been a problem at all. We've had fantastic support. To give you an example of one of the challenges we faced, and I know we have a section on challenges here, is we had a collapse in our relationship with the first developers that we hired, and a catastrophic collapse at that. I won't go into the details. I don't want to get done for defamation, although it's true. But we were sitting on the Eyesea board, and I was running through this problem of now we need to plan B. Our tech is basically useless now. And the guys from David Furnival at Bernard Schulte Ship Management put his hand up and said, look, we'll pay for a second build. MariApps, we'll use MariApps, and we'll build this for you. They never asked for any press around this. They never asked for publicity. And this is very much consistent with what we've seen from the companies involved. And you'll note from our membership, these are not the brand name companies that I would have expected to have joined Eyesea initially. It's telling that they're not there. We've approached a lot. But again, I think it comes down to trying to do things differently. The ESG space, I believe, is fundamentally broken. And I've contacted a lot of NGOs, and I've talked to a lot of in-house sustainability experts about their plans and what we're doing. And it's left me vaguely depressed at the future of sustainability within most of these big companies. They're after reports, I think, is what you could summarize.
For now, I think it comes down to that. But ultimately, where I'm hopeful and maybe less kind of depressed than you are about this is that I see a way, in my opinion, that from the ground up, people are going to start to demand reporting. So maybe this is a little bit of a precursor, but then reporting of environmental impact and full ESG. So the people are going to say, okay, I could buy this and it has a X carbon footprint and this for a little bit more, but with a lesser carbon footprint. And I think that, and again, I'm talking about a small slice of ESG, but I think that maybe that leaves me hope that people will start to demand more from companies, and ultimately that'll lead to more than just studying for a test, as they say here in the US.
Man, I think it might. I've done a little bit of reading on this recently, especially around the psychology of littering. The reports that I've read say that people won't pay more for a sustainable product. I think what I see sort of shown me a couple of things. There are people. We have a CEO of a major German shipping company who goes on holiday and collects photos for me on his phone. I think a lot of people at the moment are asking, you see the reports of, water at 100 degrees in Florida and heat bombs and whatever you want. And a lot of people are out there looking, it doesn't matter how much money you have. We're sort of all stuck in this problem together. And what we've seen is there are a lot of people that want to be involved in ESG, and I don't particularly like the term ESG. A lot of people that want to be involved in a solution, but don't know how or don't know where to start. These are people that have real jobs. I have a real job. You have a real job. They're not zealots. They don't want to give up their entire life to clean beaches, and there's no space for them. And you see this especially from the seafarers we work with, is that, taking photos of trash in the ocean is not their full-time job. It's opportunistic. But they feel a whole lot better when they do it, when they're, as part of their job. And this is very much, I think, what needs to change in terms of ESG and how companies perform and how society performs. You can travel down any road, and I'll take the US for an example because of the phenomenal wealth here. But if you drive down any road in the US, you will find litter all along the curb, right?
I walk there. So where I live in Southwest Connecticut, I live in one town, and then the town next over has this beautiful 60-acre park, and it's a quarter mile to the entrance. And literally in that time, I could walk, and I've actually thought about buying, because it's like sits in some underbrush that has like poison ivy and stuff. And actually, even right outside my own property, people just throw stuff, and I can't get to it when the brush is overgrown. It's just, I actually have thought I should buy myself one of those little trash picker things. And when I go for my walk and be like the old weird guy picking up trash, I don't even think I could make it into the park. To the first trash can is probably a half a mile. I would say it would take me a solid 40 minutes to get that far. And if I picked up all the trash.
Yep. It's really interesting. When I look at the people that are most passionate about Eyesea, they're all older. They've been successful in their jobs. They are successful in their jobs. It's great that the kids are involved in this super stuff, right? But we shouldn't be relying on a group of 18 to 25-year-olds to save the world. The networks we have developed at this stage in our careers and our lives, these are the networks that matter. These are the networks that can actually drive change. These are the networks that can get me ships, that can get things cleaned up, that can get regulation changed if we want to get started on regulation. But this is also where we can tap funding to support initiatives that are actually results-based rather than report-based.
Yep.
This is the role that shipping can play, because we're all pretty well paid, right? It's an incredibly wealthy industry. This is our time to shine, man. This is something that we should be taking a lead on, because we have the capacity, the expertise, and the influence to make change. We can bring the kids along. We don't have to rely on them to do this, and we don't have to rely on the we don't have to rely on the regulators to pass an agreement. It doesn't. You don't have to.
Yeah, you don't have to. It's not like I had Nick McCarr on an earlier podcast. He did a great job, but he sits on the MEPC committee for IMO, and he's got to rely on other things. Here, you could just say, all right, man, we want to do this. And one of the things I think we talked about before is you're actually expanding this idea beyond just the beach, but to municipalities. Like, I could take pictures from here on in and then send it. And that's kind of one of your expansion things, because it's non-denominational, so to speak, whether it's the beach or whether it's a roadside, I guess, in a tongue-in-cheek sort of way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I spent far too much time talking to local rubbish collectors in DC. The way pollution is managed in terms of its collection is still analog. As crazy as that sounds, it's based on paper maps and pre-planned routes. Nothing in this current day and age is based like that. You can order food and it's all digital. This is where we sort of see Eyesea is sort of pushing inland. This is just digitized pollution management. We show where the problem is. We show the density. We can actually show you what it is. We can the software will develop into a point where it can recommend action, or you can call in local groups. And this is like, for a port authority that gets a report of pollution and it's a Coke bottle. Well, you're not going to send out a team to go and collect one Coke bottle, but you can alert a local neighbor who wants to be part of this to go down and get it, right? And this is part of my fantasy about Eyesea being a way for the shipping community to link back to the shoreside.
It's a kind of to overcome, a common theme on this podcast. If you've listened, which you should be listening. If you're not, you should be listening. Is of course the negative reputation that Maritime has, right? And we talked before the podcast. When do you know about shipping? When I don't have paper at Walmart, when there's a ship sideways in the Suez Canal, when there's a ship recently, last couple of days, on fire off of Rotterdam, right? That's when you hear about Maritime, not like, and I think this could be a very interesting way. And like you said, just going back to this, last couple of years, my son and I have been kind of a local chapter of Trout Unlimited, which is, mostly fly fishing rivers, and they do a lot of dam abatement, stuff like that. It's a really interesting org. Once a year, we go up to, I don't know, it's someplace in upstate Connecticut to collect trash. We walk along the bank of, I think it's either the Naugatuck or the Farmington River. I forgot which one. And we walk along and we pick up trash. And I think that could be a really interesting way. We know it's there, but it's analog. We just go once a year. We go the first week of November. We pick up a bunch of stuff. We do a little fly fishing. We have some sandwiches and we go home. I mean, that's kind of
one of the first pieces of feel good feedback I had was a lady that we were explaining that another member had joined, and she went, "Isn't it nice that these ship people care about what we're doing?" And it was like, well, it's nice. It's nice that they're ship people. Mission accomplished. But one of the things that, again, the craziness of Eyesea is being swamped by non-maritime people wanting to help. We have volunteer groups and partners in Chile, in Brazil, in India. We have data from everywhere. We're getting data out of Somalia. Amazingly, we're getting data out of Somalia. Mali, we're getting data out of. Every morning I wake up and I scroll through the latest updates on the map because this is my life. And it astounds me the people who care and need an outlet to show that they're doing something. And this is a shipping initiative, which I probably speak to more non-shipping people than anyone else in the industry, all because we've hit a raw nerve of there are so many people out there who give a damn and who want to make change, and they see this as positive. And
I think it's
for the industry.
It is, and I think ultimately at the end of the day, Graeme, it could be just a great way. I just sidetrack. I sat in. I led I moderated a panel a couple of months ago. And, one of the things that came up is that there is no singular voice to put out the positive of what happening in shipping, right? Like I said, we always look at the bad. You look at the thousands and thousands of ship calls a day, port calls a day that ships make, and relatively flawless, seamless. Nobody gets hurt. Your goods get to where they have to be. And I think that that this could be an interesting way to bridge that gap. Is that like, listen, we're doing all this good stuff and we're creating these sort of initiatives. I think there's an interesting kind of overlap for sure.
This is the beginning. I'll go one step further. The beginning, like this is still very early phase, especially the spectrometry stuff. But our data suggests that actually, if you look at most ports, shipping is remarkably clean. It's the local marina with the recreational craft that actually caused most of the oil damage.
I heard that years ago that the most oil, the most oil in the water is not from people associate the Exxon Valdez or the Prestige or whatever environmental, right? That's the big ones, but on a daily basis. Whoops, the kid misses the tank at your local marina, and all of a sudden you got maybe a half a gallon. That adds up pretty quickly over thousands of marinas across the world.
Yep,
hundreds of thousands maybe.
again, it's also how we go about including. I see it's all volunteers. I don't get paid. No one gets paid. It's a completely volunteer gig, which means everything takes painfully long because everybody has other responsibilities and children. Just kidding. I love my children. But what we've seen is, with the flurry of tech that's been offered to us, we have volunteers from AWS, from Microsoft. We've got a lady in Seattle who's with Microsoft, a lady in Canada who's working with the machine learning. We have a guy in Nicholas in Argentina who works with Waze. Marta is based in Madrid and she is with AWS. These are pretty grunty people in terms of their expertise, and they're all keen to help because they believe in what we're trying to do. I never could have dreamt it would have gone like this. Like, when we first started, it was like, I hope the seafarers like it. They do. I spend my nights messaging seafarers now. But it's a combination of that, the local volunteers who are trying so hard to make this work and have asked for nothing in return. At some point, Eyesea is going to have to grow up. That is becoming painfully apparent. But right now, it's just a continual good news story of people wanting to help, right from the CEO of a shipping company through to a student in Brazil who's doing her bit by taking photos and telling us what parts of the app don't work.
Yeah. It's
a pretty good beginning.
It is a great beginning. And kind of one thing as we kind of pivot here, with all of your outreach to non-shipping people and dealing with, younger folks, would you encourage them to come into the shipping industry, whether being a mariner or,
no,
working on projects like this or yeah, that's all right. Hey, we've had most people say, yeah, we love it. What would you tell somebody who says, listen, Graeme, I love this. This is really interesting what you're doing, but I want to go deeper. What would you tell them about that? What would be your advice? And not from a seafarer. I'm not saying to, go become a third assistant engineer, but I'm saying just being in the business, just being in the business.
Well, I love this industry. Like I came into it through, I was working in legal services and marketing and comms. I started working for a Norwegian law firm in Singapore. That's how I slipped into shipping. There's nothing like this industry in terms of the opportunity, the fun. It is just genuinely a fun industry to be in. The camaraderie, I think there's a huge amount of that. But my God, do we have some problems to sort out in terms of how we reach out to people that aren't one of us. I was at a Maritime conference recently, and I'm 50, and I was one of the younger people in the room. Yeah, and that is outrageous.
Yeah.
The same people that talk at every conference, they're the same people.
Yeah.
We don't look outside our industry, and the demographics of our industry should terrify us.
Yeah, I agree. That's one of the reasons why, I know personally on this podcast, I try to diversify, not just, but regions and backgrounds and things like that, have a different viewpoint. But I also think that kind of, what you're doing could actually be a conduit to getting some people who are not maritime people, it doesn't have to be younger, but somebody who's, like you said, in an NGO, involved in our industry.
And it's not even an NGO. I mean, it's the kids care about this, so we have to care about it if we want them to be part of our business. And that's and I think we also need to look beyond just like, oh, they like the environment, isn't that nice? I think Eyesea has shown that everybody likes the environment. It doesn't mean you have to call yourself an environmentalist. You can call yourself an outdoorsman, for example, or a seafarer, or a mariner.
And you don't have to eat granola and wear Birkenstocks.
Don't have to. I mean, I quite like granola, but I tell you what, as you get older, my advice: eat granola.
Yeah, no sugar, man. No sugar when you get older. No sugar.
But I think, like, one of the things that we are doing is I'll talk about it and we'll say there's a asterisk next to it because we haven't signed the agreement yet. We're looking at a partnership with the University of the Aegean to help us work on the tech behind Eyesea, but not with the Maritime School. This is with the computer science school or the computer engineering school. And this is like Maritime needs to look beyond like, oh well, you qualified as a seafarer, that's great, or you could be a broker, super. We keep on going, oh, we'll never attract the kids that are going to go to Google, and it's like, well, no, we're not. Well, maybe we're not. I mean, maybe we can do some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting point, is that regardless of kind of the end game of ESG, there's a lot of stuff going with ESG right now, a lot of interesting technology, a lot of use of AI, MI, and these sort of things. And what's interesting is maybe not 100% a shift, but there are a lot of companies now that are working remote or allow remote work, which can attract other people who have been outside the industry. I mean, I kind of came in as an industry outsider in the sense of my family wasn't involved in it, but like you said, the demographics, I kind of fit in the demographics. But what I see is one of the powerful things is one of the same reasons why seafarers like the environment is because it's a common through our cultures. And I think that we can actually leverage that. I think that what you're doing could be an interesting lever to get people interested.
I hope so. Sure. But I think we need to give these people space to grow into the industry. And I remember one of the first conversations I had in shipping was with Kevin Leach-Smith, who's now at Taylor Maritime. I knew nothing. We were at our first event, and he basically said, "So what do you know about shipping?" And I went, "Nothing." And he goes, "It's a good answer. I guess we better teach you then." It's that sort of process of having someone who's in the industry take you under their wing and wants you to succeed that makes the difference. Yeah. And we can bring anybody we want into this industry as long as we give them purpose, as long as we show that they can make a difference. And this is, Eyesea it's got Eyesea written all over it. But let people in and let people make a difference and let people make change.
Absolutely. And then over time, it'll be more, I've quoted her before, but Captain Lundy, she's done like this great job of outreach. She's South African, but she said one of her things I heard her say was you have to see it to be it, right? So as you get more diversity, then you get more people who have not really been part of the industry to realize I could do this as well. And I think, hopefully your tool could be one of the tools that can lead that. As we wrap up, I love to, I used to ask a question about what you like to write, and I already know, so I'm going to do this by year. So last year and into this year, a little bit about what are you reading? This year's question for the 20 or so that we have for season 2 is going to be, who is your greatest fictional superhero? And I already have next year's. I wrote next year's down. Next year's going to be interesting. But who is your greatest fictional superhero?
Look, and I've never been in that much Indiana Jones briefly, but I've never been that much into I guess hero worship. I think you'd have to again one last push on the Eyesea, sign up, come aboard. The future is what we make it. And the more people in shipping that get on board with this, the more chance we have to make real change. There's no excuse. Everybody's in the industry who's listening to this podcast, be it inland waterways, be it, down in Houston, be it in DC. Everyone has the ability to make change on an environmental issue and not be ashamed about it or scared of it. We seem to spend so much time being afraid of what people are going to think about us when it comes to an environmental issue. This can change. You can be your own hero. How very
I love that. You can be your own hero. Yeah. No, I just like to ask that's sort of interesting. But I like the Indiana Jones as a nod to your early days as an archaeologist. I think we all, everybody here, at least I think we're in the same age bucket there. It was, the onslaught of Star Wars and Indiana Jones, basically speaking to my personal childhood. So, Graeme, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This was interesting. We wish you the best of luck. Of course, I'll put a link into the app, the website, into the show notes there. Obviously, if like Graeme said, if anybody's listening and just download it on the app. I do it when I travel and I see trash and I try to pick it up and mitigate it or whatever you say. But thank you for coming on the podcast. We really do appreciate it.
Great to be here, mate. Thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to chatting about this sometime in the future.
Absolutely. We'll have you back on when you have version 3 or version 4 and you're taking over the world. Absolutely. Thanks,
6 months, man. Cheers.
Good. Thanks. Bye-bye.